So we're here with Jayson Davies from OT Schoolhouse. So how'd you start, and why'd you start?
So 20 it's 2018, going back, oh gosh, it's getting close to a decade now. That's crazy. 2018, like myself, I was working at a rural school district. By rural, I mean like for California standards, about 11 or 12 schools. Um, and I had one other occupational therapist that I was working with, and we would meet on a regular basis, right? And we would bounce ideas off of each other, but we were both relatively new to school-based occupational therapy, and we didn't have other people to bounce ideas off of. And one day we actually reached out to the district that was next to us, and by next to us, I mean like 30 minutes away, and we went and met with them. And it was just a great experience. We had the opportunity to talk to other OT practitioners that we didn't usually talk to. We had a chance to like see what their programs look like, what their referral process look like, what their evaluation look like, what their just frequency of services look like and what the services themselves actually look like. And it was just really refreshing to be able to talk to other people and find that out. And so I was listening to podcasts. I actually drove about an hour and a half to that job every day. And so I had a lot of time for podcasts. And so I started listening to podcasts about business and how to start a podcast and how to blog. And between the two of us, the other OT practitioner and I, we decided to start a blog at first. And then I quickly realized that I don't like typing. I'm much better at talking. And so the blog quickly turned into a podcast. And hence the OT Schoolhouse podcast was born. Yeah.
Nice.
So that's basically how it got started.
So so were you kind of lacking mentorship in your district? I know when I first started, I had no mentorship, so it was
Gosh.
like sometimes I get to ask my
Yeah,
contract
yeah. So
company if they didn't know.
yeah, so when I first, so I graduated in 2012 from OT school, and then I took a contract-based job for 1 year. And in that role, I did have support because there was a large team. But then, me being me, I decided, you know what? I want to be an in-house therapist. I want to have the benefits of being in-house. I want to start developing that pension that you get when you're in-house at a school district. And so I actually left the contract job that I was at and I took a job that was way over my head. Like, quite honestly, the job that I was just referring to where I worked, I was the first OT practitioner that they hired in-house at a school with about 12 schools and a caseload of around 100. These OT assistant who had worked as a contractor for that district was being hired by the district. So it's just me and her taking on this entire caseload. I was 1 year out of school, and here I am coming into a district where I have to develop basically the entire systems from referral to intervention, figuring out how we're going to combine to see these 100 kids between myself and the OTA. So yeah, I kind of jumped in way over my head, and it was just her and I, like we had no one else. I mean, my sister's an occupational therapist, so not really school based, but I would bounce ideas off of her occasionally. I had some people that I did work with for a year at that other school district, so I would call and talk to them. But there was no contract agency that I could call up and be like, "Hey, any professional developments coming up?" The local SELPA, which is like the county, would have some PD courses that we could sign up and go to, but no mentorship. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty much how I started, and I was in New York when I started, and I just pretty much had the physical therapist show me the ropes, and they just kind of threw me in. Principal didn't know who I was, but I
Yeah,
also
right?
started in 2002, so I don't even think we had the internet. I'm just joking, but we definitely didn't have like Google and like podcasts and things I can look up, but so just relied on other staff to
Yeah.
be like, "Yeah, you're supposed to be looking at this," and I'd be like, okay. And I never took an elective in
Yeah,
school.
what do you mean?
Like, oh, I had a pediatric class, but I didn't have a school-based class. It was like an elective that we couldn't.
Yeah, me neither.
So I wanted to do rehab, and I was
I
gonna
didn't take
throw.
one. Our school technically had one.
Yeah, same one with ours. I just didn't elect to do it
There's
because I
definitely a
didn't want to
delay.
work with kids. But now for 22 years,
Okay,
I've been working with kids, so it kind of worked out. Worked out.
yeah, yeah. I actually, and Yeah, in hindsight, like the elective that USC had this some sort of grant program. And if I would have gone through their school-based OT program and gone into the schools, if I would have worked in the schools for like 5 years right after school-based or right after OT school, like I did, and gone through that program, I think they would have paid back like $10,000 worth of loans because they were trying, like, there was such a need for OT practitioners in the schools that USC had some sort of program with the state or something like that. But nope, I didn't think I'd end up in the schools either, so I didn't do that.
But now
But to
life
your
works
point,
out that way.
also, yeah, yeah. But to your point about mentorship, school-based SLPs and especially school psychologists were some of my biggest mentors because those were the people who were at the district. And so I learned a lot from special education teachers, SLPs, and especially school psychologists as well. I was actually housed, quote unquote, at the district office because we had 12 schools. So the psychologists were also, quote unquote, housed at the district office at that school site or at the district. And so I was very close with the school psychs and learned a lot from them.
And so you transitioned from doing how many years after you started working in schools did you start writing the blog?
Started writing the blog in 2017, so about 4.5 years.
Okay. And then how long did you write the blog before you went to podcasting?
About 8 months or so.
Oh, okay.
I mean,
And then you
definitely not
originally did it with your
consistent.
business partner.
I mean, the first, yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, to be honest, I mean, the first 6 to 8 months of building a blog is just like figuring out how the heck to have a website and designing the website and spending time on the things that we sometimes spend too much time on, like obsessing over the name of your business and the name of your or what your logo is going to look like and all that fun stuff, right? But yeah, about 8 months of inconsistent writing blogs.
Yeah, no, I can foresee myself on that path with this podcast. I was like, I want to have a kind of funny logo. Well, obviously the colors have went with double time docs because that's kind of where I'm branching off from, or through, I guess. But yeah, I definitely am focusing on the wrong things. I'm in my daughter's bedroom, and it didn't really have it set up, but you know, just kind of wing it, just like everything else I do. Is if nobody knows us, I talk to Jayson quite often, running ideas by him, and for the most part, not following through with them. But him and I will fist bump later when I see him in person. But
Yeah,
so your
yeah, we
first
should
couple of
did we
podcasts
definitely should
were
have recorded in Philly.
yeah, over the cheesesteak.
Yeah,
That would have been awesome.
yeah, yeah.
And
We wouldn't have.
how long did you wait until you transitioned from actually not servicing kids anymore to just doing your OT schoolhouse stuff?
Oh gosh, the OT Schoolhouse was my nights and weekend job, or it wasn't even a job; it was a hobby at that time. Like from 2018. Because we started the blog in 2017, the podcast came in 2018, and I continued working until about 2021, early 2021 or 20, gosh, no, it must have been 22. That I stepped aside, maybe 21. But anyways, I stepped aside from my full-time job and went full-time in the OT Schoolhouse in about, yeah, 2021, I think it was. So I was still doing this part-time, yeah, a podcast. I was doing that part-time. I was editing the show. In 2020, I think is when I started to hand off editing duties, maybe not till 2021. But I was doing everything, and this was before we had AI to support us with all this. And so, um, yeah, yeah. A lot of nights and weekend stuff. But my wife was going through her master's program in 2018, 2019. And so we would just go to Corner Bakery and she'd be doing master special education and master's homework and I'd be working on the podcast, working on the website, all that fun stuff.
Now, is this something you foresee or foresaw yourself doing? Like, did you always want to do something? I guess something like this. I don't even know how to word it because podcasts. When did podcasts really get popular? 2010 ish, 2012.
That's when they, yeah, around 2012 they started to get popular, I think.
Yeah, so did you foresee yourself going in this direction, or were you planning on being like, I'm gonna retire at a school with my pension after when I'm 65 or whatever?
Yeah, I went through a few steps. The first was I thought I would actually own a clinic at some point in my life, a pediatric sensory integration type of clinic. I remember that was like my 10-year plan when we had to write a 10-year plan in OT school. And so that was the long-term goal then. As soon as I came out of OT school, I landed in that contracting job I was talking about earlier. So at that point, I was like, okay, well, I'm schools. I enjoy it. I'll stay here. And like I said, I went directly into, or pretty quickly, I went into a district job because I was thinking long term about the pension, about the retirement. And I did expect to just kind of be in that for a long time. Even when we started the business, like I said, it kind of started as a hobby. I mean, we knew that there was a potential for making money at some point, but we were just putting out podcast episodes, not expecting anything. Like we weren't selling anything. We were just putting out blogs and podcast episodes and putting out some stuff on social media. We thought maybe, if it takes off, then maybe one day we'll figure out a way to monetize it. Maybe we'll have professional development courses. Maybe we'll sell shirts or something. I don't know, but didn't exactly know where we were going. We were just getting started with the podcast and some articles.
Yeah, and one of the questions when I posted this on Facebook was one of the girls was, how long did it take to make money, I guess, from doing your podcast? And I don't know if you actually make money from the podcast or it's from where you get all your advertisements and stuff like that for your OT Schoolhouse for all the other professional development stuff you have.
Yeah, so I'll speak to that a little bit because I've gone through different phases of how I bring in revenue. Today, the podcast primarily is a marketing tool to bring people into my atmosphere, into my ecosystem at the OT Schoolhouse. That is true. I am to the point now where we're also starting to bring in sponsors. And so that is revenue for the podcast because we will have sponsorships, sponsored ads in the podcast. But the first way that I actually tried to monetize the podcast was to let people listen for free, and then people could pay on my website to get a CEU for listening or a certificate of completion for listening. And I now know that other OT podcasts are doing something similar. There's a few that are doing that. I'm pretty sure I kind of started that concept a while back, and I kind of went away from it because we were trying to sell one-off CEUs for each different episode. So it's like you would listen to episode 23, and then you could go to otschoolhouse.com/episode 23, and you could hit the purchase button and take a quiz, and you would get a certificate for that particular episode. Um, but it just wasn't we had a few people doing it, but it wasn't enough to like make it worth doing it. And so we stopped doing that and kind of rerouted. And at that point, it was mostly me just doing everything. And I had to really be careful where my energy was being spent in the most worthwhile task per se. Once I launched my, full-blown course, which I still have the A to Z school-based OT course, and then the back to school conference, then I really shifted to, you know what? I'm just using the podcast to give out a bunch of free information, to build trust with everybody, to just, have a place for people to come and listen and build trust with me, hear from the great people that I have on. And maybe they'll come and join my course because they understand how much knowledge I have to share in my course. And maybe they'll come to my conference because they understand how much I have to share as well as the guests that I have on. Because when I started my conference, a lot of the people that spoke at my conference had previously been on the podcast. And so people were listening to the podcast, getting to know one of the speakers that had been on my podcast. And then I marketed to them this course that they could actually learn more formally, like most people are used to learning from at the conference. So, yeah, it took me until about like 2021 or no, about 2020 is when I actually started generating income. So about 3 years after starting the podcast.
And how many episodes into that were you roughly?
Gosh. Let's figure about 20 episodes a year for 3 years. So probably about 40 or about 50, 60 episodes in.
So I should just quit now then. I'm just, but
You are, you, I always tell people like I always tell people that are looking to start a business, like you got to have one marketing stream and one revenue stream. And Jason, I mean, this podcast is either officially or unofficially sponsored by Double Time Docs, and that kind of is your revenue stream. And
True.
so this acts as a marketing stream. And so if someone is going to start fresh on a podcast today, I would encourage you to kind of have an idea of both. Like the marketing, your podcast can be your marketing, or your social media can be your marketing, or your YouTube channel can be your marketing. Um, but then have something to sell on the back end. Have something that you can say up front in your podcast intro. Hey, this podcast is brought to you by insert my course here. This is this podcast is supplementary to this course over here. If you enjoy the podcast, go check out that course. And then you spend the next 30 minutes just talking about whatever. That's helpful to people.
Yeah, and I think generally speaking, that's kind of what I was kind of going for. Just being as transparent as possible. Like we did want to, as Double Time Dodge, we did want to figure out a way to do a little bit more marketing, get ourselves out there a little bit more, and and just like you, like writing the blogs, I have lots of ideas floating in my head. And I like to talk to people about it, but I hate writing. I don't even like reading. So it, it's, so I just maybe figured that this would be a little bit easier. You and I talked about doing those Instagram reel things where you're talking into the camera. And I can't do that quite yet because I need feedback from something. And so, or someone. And
Yeah.
my job right now, I barely talk to anybody because the kids I test don't really talk. And then the parents have them mostly speak Spanish, and I don't speak Spanish. But so this is like a little outlet for me, and should be interesting. So kind of excited, kind
Yeah.
of scared, sweating a little
One
bit.
thing that I did, oh yeah, yeah, and I don't know if you've done this, but one thing that I did when I started the podcast, I blatantly remember I told myself, you know what? I am going to podcast for 1 year. I'm going to look at the downloads because it's fun to look at how many downloads you're getting. I'm not going to give up because no one's listening. I'm not going to change anything based upon data. I'm just going to podcast every other week for 1 year. After that year, I'll kind of measure. I'll measure what's going on. Are we getting downloads? And at that point, I was going to decide if it was worth continuing or not, and it was. Maybe you don't have time to go for 1 year. You can set that up for 6 months. Like, but give yourself, a kind of a date that you want to reassess. But give yourself time to actually learn because one thing that's really interesting about podcasting is once you start podcasting, you start to find the stories that A, you like to tell, and B, you find the stories that people like to hear. And once you have those stories, and to be honest, I mean, we only have so many stories in our lives that we A, remember and B, tell. And those are the same stories that resonate in different platforms. So I found that I kept telling my guest a similar story. And then you know what? That same story can be turned into an Instagram reel. That same
Yeah.
story can be turned into a blog post or a Facebook post or something like that. So the more you podcast, the more you talk, just like anything else you do, the more reps you get in, the more you learn, the more content you have.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me, like I, as a person, like I wasn't very, I guess I'm always kind of extroverted, but I didn't really talk that much. I guess never mind. I take that back because in third grade, I did get sat next to the window because I talked too much. But maybe that's why I had a weird self consciousness or about it as I grew up. But transitioning to this is uncomfortable too, and something I just I'll grow into.
I feel like you're used to doing uncomfortable stuff now, like sending me a picture of my dog that you drew. I mean, like, did not expect that, right? No, but that's interesting you say that though, that you bring up about how you learn to talk. And I've never thought about this, but I think for me, because I was more introverted, I think what helped me to grow my confidence in both talking as well as in talking specifically about school-based OT was actually participating in IEP meetings. Like IEP meetings, it forces you to, you kind of have to have confidence behind yourself when you're talking about your report and you're talking about your recommendations and your goals that you think are important for a child. So for me, I think it was actually IEPs is where I started grow confidence in my ability to talk, whether it be on a podcast or other platforms.
Yeah, and I would agree with you on that. And just even like identifying when you don't know something and you'll be like, I'll find that out or whatever. And then asking around. I mean, I guess back in the day when I couldn't Google things, I would ask the PT or the OT on the district or look in other kids' files to see if something else has happened that's similar in that similar situation. Like, and and this is part of the reason why I kind of wanted to do a podcast also is talking about these experiences on that, from when reading all the Facebook posts that people are having a really hard time, adjusting going from college to being a school-based OT or even just being an OT in general. And it does appear like a lot of people are losing confidence in the job and it seems actually in themselves, but we all start that way. And I guess if people know that
Yeah.
a lot of it has to do with experience. You're not gonna learn a lot in school. I mean, you get
Yeah.
that foundation and stuff like that, but you really you really have to just experience everything and then just keep working through it and
Yeah.
know that you'll get better. Just like
Yeah.
this
I mean,
podcast.
gosh. Yeah, exactly. Just like this podcast. I still remember my first like interviews for the school-based OT position, like the first one that I got as a contractor. And it was so weird. I mean, my first interview wasn't really an interview because it was with a contract agency. They don't interview you.
Yeah.
Like, anyways, I thought it was like an interview. They were literally bringing me on to help me plan for the interview that would be with the actual school district. And I think that was the first time that like they're like, do you know what an IEP is? I'm like, kind of. And they're like, okay, well, this is what you need to know because they're going to ask you this at the school district when you meet with them. And like literally, I don't think I knew what an IEP was coming out of college. Like it wasn't until I was like, I need to learn about it because that's what they do in school-based OT. And so all that's to say is I didn't go into school, or sorry, I didn't go into my first job with any experience in IEPs. I barely knew what an IEP was. I just knew that it was a team meeting where we discussed the student. And yeah, I was super uncomfortable. And you just kind of have to learn on the job. That growth mindset, I guess, you just kind of,
Yeah.
you,
Not
you
yet.
don't fake it till you make it. What?
Yeah. Well, there was I was listening to somebody and it was just saying like how the experience of being an OT, and actually this was a blog I kind of wrote that I never published, but it was kind of like, I suck, I suck, I suck, and then I don't suck. And that's pretty much how my career went. It was like for years, like, I suck as an OT, I suck as an OT. And then at least in my mind, I say I don't suck. So at some point you make that
When
leap.
was that moment? 22 years in? I don't think that's helpful to the new school-based OT practitioners out there.
She's like, sorry, I don't know what's happening. I just started this job. But
Well, that's
anyway,
a strategy, isn't it? All right.
your podcast, back to podcasting, is when did you get super comfortable just interviewing people? I mean, it helps that I know you, but if you were somebody just random, like, I'm kind of sarcastic and sometimes I don't take things seriously, but then that might not float
It's okay.
very well with other people. Actually, what kind of reminds me, in my school, I was actually called unprofessional, and just because I joked around a lot and I yawned a lot and I
I can see
looked
that.
tired. But when did you
I
feel
got,
comfortable doing your podcast? Like, when was it like this is pretty natural to me?
I don't know. I don't know. Like, there are still times where it doesn't feel natural sometimes. Like, I think it's more about, it feels more natural when I'm talking to a person who I'm very interested in talking to, or about a topic that I'm very interested in talking about. Like, it would be hard for me to feel comfortable to go on to a podcast episode and talk about, I'll try and stay school based because that's my area. Even, for example, I'm about to release an episode on neurodiversity affirming care for students, and I really appreciate the person that I interviewed, Bryden Carlson Giving. And so for me, it was a relatively simple podcast because I'm very intrigued in the topic and I'm very intrigued in him as an individual because I met him a few times at AOTA. However, if you took him out of the equation and just asked me to talk about neurodiversity affirming care for students in school, God, that'd be the most uncomfortable thing in the world for me to try and do a solo episode on that. What's really nice about interviews is that it gives you a moment to think about like what's going on and to think about what your next question is going to be and to think and listen and develop a response to that person. Solo episodes are much harder, in my opinion, than interviewing people. And so I try to do solo episodes as often as I can, but sometimes they're just really hard to do because you're literally talking to a screen and you already discussed, the difficulty of doing that earlier. It's just really hard to talk to nobody. So I don't know. I don't think, kind of like what you're talking about with school-based OT, it really depends on the episode, on the day, on the topic, on the person that you're talking to. I don't know. I will say this, I do a lot of research on the people that I interview, and I spend time developing questions and probably more so than some people do. Like I
And
spend time before the recorded what?
you said I prepare questions and I do research, and I'm just winging it over here.
But yeah, no, like I do a lot of like I actually have a pre-meeting. Like we kind of had a pre-meeting because we met over Philly cheesesteaks. We kind of discussed this and
Yeah,
we've been texting back and forth about it, but I will
no
sometimes
need
do
to
like a
backtrack.
pre-meeting with the guest to kind of have an idea. Yeah, no need to backtrack. But anyways, gosh, I would say it's still not always comfortable. That's for sure.
And how do you pick your people? Do you search people or do people find you now?
I thought we actually put up a forum on my website, like, hey, if you want to be a podcast guest, fill out this form. The only people that fill it out are people that I don't want on the podcast, honestly. Maybe like one or two over the years have come from people finding that form and me wanting to interview them on the podcast. Typically, it comes from me reaching out to people. I go to conferences and I sit in on sessions, and if I like the session, I talk to the person afterwards and say, "Hey, you interested in getting this out to thousands of people rather than the 18 people that sat in the session?" Or I look at research and I look for people who are publishing research and I say, "Hey, this is a great article. Would you mind coming on and sharing a little bit about your article?" Fun fact, I did actually have one of my first ever people that I am bringing on from a cold email. I'm bringing him on in a few days. He uses he's an autistic individual and he uses Rubik's cubes to build art, and he's actually working with schools and working with therapists to like help them to use Rubik art in therapy and education. And he actually reached out to me cold email via the website, like just the little form at the bottom of my website that says contact us like thing. And so he just did that. And he's probably the first or second person that I've ever had on that reached out to me in that manner. So typically it's me reaching out to people because I see their work of some sort and invite them on the show.
I think I actually saw either an Instagram video of some guy making a Rubik's Cube art, and I'm curious to be if it will be the same person.
This guy's relatively new to it. He's relatively new, I think, but his name's Kyle. I can't remember his last name, but his website is Kyle Cubes. Kyle's Cubes. I can't remember if there's an S at the end of Kyle's or if it's just Kyle Cubes or KylesCubes.com. Yeah, I'm excited. Oh wow, excuse me. I'm excited to have him on. It's going to be a really fun episode. In the summertime when school-based OT practitioners aren't working, I like to kind of have some more fun episodes, some that aren't as heavy, as professional development type of episodes. So I like to bring on people that um, tone it down a little bit.
Yeah. No, that's good. Mix it up a little bit. How did you start advertising your podcast, or is it just yeah, and just on Facebook? Well, how'd you in the beginning? Because now there's
Basically,
like 20 podcasts, OT podcasts that it's.
yeah, I think at the time I got started, there were only like, I think AOTA had put a few episodes out, but it wasn't like consistently anything was happening. Sarah Putt, I think her and I started around the same time, the OT for Life podcast. But there weren't a lot of podcasts out there, and there still actually isn't another podcast dedicated to school-based OT that I know of right now. You have Meg Farrell's podcast, the Learn, Play, Thrive podcast that's really dedicated to neurodiversity affirming practice. You have a few OT Potential, of course, and you've had a few others that have popped up and disappeared over the years. Anyways, I guess what I'm saying is that there wasn't a lot of competition then. to be honest, there's still not a lot of competition in the podcast space. The way that I advertised was by just being helpful in Facebook groups. And so I would go into Facebook groups like the ones that you've talked about, and someone would ask a question about what should be in an evaluation. And our first episode, the very first episode we ever put out was about evaluation tools or about how to write an evaluation. And so
Wait a minute, what
I
number
would
was I?
respond to the person. You were, I don't know. You should have researched that before the episode started so that you could
I was
shout that
going
out.
to, but I had to pick up my kids from school. They had a half day, and I had to make
Sure.
them lunch.
Blame it on the
But
kids.
I should know that because I was on it. But anyway,
You've been on more than once, haven't you now?
yeah,
I think you've been
twice.
on twice.
Yeah,
Yeah. We talked about notes and something else. Evaluations. Anyways, I I would go into the Facebook groups, the school-based OT Facebook groups, and I would answer people's questions. I'd say, hey, you know what? My steps for completing an evaluation is first get the referral, do the occupational profile, observe the student, conduct your assessment tools if you're going to do that, and then write up the summary and everything. And so I would answer their question, and then I would say, by the way, if you're interested, I did an entire episode on this over on the OT Schoolhouse podcast. Here's the link. And I would just do that a lot, a lot, a lot, a lot. I would answer people's questions, super helpful, and then I would give them the resource. Also, back then, I don't think there was as many people dropping resources into those groups, which
yeah.
is now groups are a little bit more, they don't want you to drop resources and links into most of them. Some of them still allow it. Some of them will allow you to like market yourself on the second day of the month or something like that. So you can do that. That's definitely something that I've done over time too. It's just kind of post in, hey, I dropped a new episode. Or sometimes I would go in there once people started to like know who I was, I would go in and be like, hey, I'm looking for topics for the podcast. What would you like to be on the podcast? And then tell people to follow me on Instagram too, because once they're on my Instagram, I can say whatever the heck I want to them. So with Instagram now, you can share links on stories, which helps. You can put up polls to ask people, hey, what topic do you want me to talk about? Uh, there's still OTs, there's still SLPs and PTs starting podcasts today, so it's not too late. Uh,
One.
I personally would, yeah, right, like yours, Jason. Literally today. And I think I told you that, but I'll say this too to everyone listening. If
You
you
mean my mom?
want to optimize your ability, what? Your mom's
You
listening?
said
Oh
everyone
gosh.
listening. I have one
Hi
listening.
mom.
Anyway, so yeah.
Hi
Okay,
mom.
I'll go ahead.
If you want to maximize your ability to repurpose your content, I would say record your video for your podcast and put it onto YouTube. Even if it sucks, put it onto YouTube because no one's going to find your videos on YouTube, the ones that you're putting up today, like people aren't necessarily going to find them. But by the time you start getting good at putting up, your episodes on YouTube, well, then you'll have an audience and then they'll start watching your newer videos. And by that point, your newer videos will probably be better than your old videos, but you won't get good until you suck. And so just put something out there, put it up online, even if it's bad. What's nice about the videos is, like I said, you can repurpose it because literally YouTube, you can hit a publish button and it'll publish your YouTube video to your podcast feed. And then you can cut 30 seconds for an Instagram reel. And then you can tell AI to turn it into a blog post. And so with video, you can do a lot more. I kind of wish I would have started with a video podcast, back in 2017. But who knows? You never know.
Be in a totally different place now, possibly.
Yeah, I could be YouTube famous.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you're AOTA famous. I mean, did follow you around like a shadow, and all the people who recognize
You
you.
did.
Is that is that how's that feeling to be recognized in? I mean, in obviously in the AOTA like conferences and stuff like that. Is it a weird feeling?
It's different, definitely different. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely weird. You see people walking past you and you don't know if they know you or not, versus like you just assume that nobody knows you when you're walking around as an individual person, right? Like when you're walking around with the podcast and people do know you, you're kind of like, people are looking at you like, is that person wanting to come say hi to me? Should I say hi? Should I ask them if they know who I am or what the OT Schoolhouse is? What should I do? And then it also gets overwhelming. Like I kind of said earlier, I'm more introverted by nature when I was younger, for sure. And so for me, I enjoy it, but I also get overwhelmed by it. And so like it was really nice when you and I just like let's get out of here and go get a Philly cheesesteak, just you and me, because they like gave me a moment to calm down. And then I think the next day or the I don't know what day it was, but I was like, you know what? I'm not going to a session right now. I need a moment. And so I just went for a walk. I got some pho. I saw the some of
Love
the
sign.
artwork and ran into the giant the Musk the We Hate Musk protest that was going on, or the Trump Musk protest going on outside. I don't know
Nice.
if you must not have been there that day. Otherwise, you probably would have been with me walking around. But yeah, there was a big protest in downtown Philly that day. So yeah, fun stuff.
It is.
Any other questions?
Yeah, no, I guess I'll have to let you go. I took up an hour of your time, but I just want to say congratulations with everything you've done. I've got to see you grow, and then congratulations in getting the F in your initials. If you want to say something about that, sure how that works, but I
The
know it's prestigious, maybe.
FAOTA, yeah. Like I never anticipated I would have that. Like it was something that, when you start learning about the FAOTA as an OT and kind of think like, should I maybe think about that? Should I not? It's kind of cool, but it seems like it's only for academics. And so I always kind of thought to myself, like the only way I'm ever gonna get that is to go down research, and I don't want to do a lot of research. And it was actually finally someone kind of convinced me. They're like, no, it's not just for people who do research. Like you've had an impact on the field. And so my friend Sabrina said she would nominate me, and it's like, just send me over some stuff, and so I did. And um, yeah, that's kind of how it came about. And I did not expect to get it. I knew that I think in my mind I knew that I deserved to be a part of it. Like I knew that the impact that I've had on school-based OT practitioners like warranted something
Some
meaningful.
acknowledgement.
Yeah, but at the same time, I was perfectly fine with just like I know the impact that I'm having. Like I don't necessarily need AOTA to say that I'm impacting the profession. I mean, AOTA has invited me on their podcast to talk about AI and stuff, and they've invited me to speak at a webinar and stuff. So, like, I don't know. It's definitely interesting. It's definitely something I add to my presentations now at the end of my name. But it's kind of like a doctor. Like talk to school-based OT practitioner. No one wants to be called Dr. Davies, Dr. Gonzales, or anything like that. Like, it's kind of
Especially
like
when I'm
that.
not
So,
one,
but yeah, pretty. Yeah, yeah. Oh gosh, yeah.
which is
It's always fun
awkward.
when people think I'm a doctor. Does that happen to you? Do people ever call you Dr. Gonzales? Like they just assume you're a doctor?
No, no, they don't. My parents
Yeah.
are doctors.
Students.
I hear them all the time.
When I talk to OT students, like occupational therapy students, if I go and like speak at a program or something, like everyone just assumes that you're a doctor. And I think part of that comes from because a lot of the OT students are now doing their OTD. And so they just assume that their professors must also have doctorates or whatnot. So yeah, but no,
Yeah,
don't have
that
that
could be
one either.
another
That's a whole nother
conversation.
story.
Yeah,
Yeah.
on my journey of trying to get a doctorate, but that'll be a different topic. But what was I going to say?
Any
Well, thank.
units?
Oh, I think I had like 20. I had one quarter left. So, but that all had to do with money, and that's why I'm doing this podcast so I can not make
Pay
money.
for
And
your OTD?
yeah, well, no, yeah. So what's last question for you? What do you got planned? What's your next 10 year? What's your 10 year goal?
10-year goal?
That's your
Oh
clinic.
gosh.
Yeah, well, you wanted to do a clinic in 10 years when you graduated.
Yeah, I won't tell you. I mean, I don't know. I don't know that I have any particular goals, but I'll tell you some ideas I'm thinking about. One idea is because I do have such like I would like to expand the OT Schoolhouse in various ways, but I honestly don't know how. And it's going to take a lot of work to figure this out. But I've thought about because I already provide support for school-based OT practitioners, is potentially starting a contract agency that is basically run by the OT Schoolhouse. So that way, people who I already know are interested in being the best version of themselves as a school-based OT because they follow me. I can then turn around and vouch for them at other school districts and provide them with potentially jobs, and then also continue to provide support and mentorship for them. So that's something that I've thought about. I think the ultimate goal, honestly, is I want to my business goal, whether it's OT Schoolhouse or otherwise, is to get to a point where I can work while my kids are at school and take off time when my kids aren't at school. And that's both summertime as well as after 2:30 in the afternoon when they come home. Like that's the ultimate goal for me, I think. It's just to be able to have more time with the family. And so if I can basically work when they're not available and not work when they are available, I think that's kind of the long-term goal.
And that should be everybody's goal.
Right.
If you have
Right.
kids.
You've had a
Not, then
chance
you're
to
not.
do some of that.
Yeah, yeah. And now we're massive amounts of debt. But anyway, I'm just joking. Nobody needs to know my
Gymnastics, man. Gymnastics
Dan.
day.
It's dance. Dance. That's
Dance,
my
sorry.
next episode. We're gonna talk about dance.
Dance
But
dads.
actually, I think my next episode is gonna be I met one of our dance dads is a podiatrist. And I want to talk about toe walking because everybody has questions about toe walking.
Interesting.
But that's gonna be
But we
one
don't
of
think about it from other perspectives. I agree.
yeah, no, podiatrists should be interesting. I want to see how they collaborate with PTs. Is toe walking becoming more than it was 20 years ago because kids aren't like, why are they toe walking? Is it sensory? Is it something to do with developmental? All that stuff. So I think I could talk to them about that for like 40 minutes or to see what other things are weird
Yeah.
things coming up with kids developing differently than
I
they
love
were
that.
20 years. So
I love that because that's not an episode you would hear on any other OT podcast. That's for dang sure. And that's not an episode you'd hear just about like I love that you're thinking about how you can talk to other professionals about things that OT practitioners are interested in because literally no one does that and it's hard to do because OTs talk to other OTs because we know other OTs. Like for me, like I said, most of my guests are because I have read their work or I've seen them present and they're like I can have a conversation with them about OT. But if you bring on a podiatrist, like I've never seen an OT interview a podiatrist. I've never seen a podiatrist interview an OT. Like the minds are just totally different minds, and that'll be a really cool conversation.
hopefully,
I'm
or it could
sure it
be
will be.
awkward in
Jason, you
silence.
make everything fun.
I'll get a better computer or a better internet.
Yes, do that.
All
Although
right,
he's
thanks.
local to you, you could record that. You could record that in person.
Well, yeah, that's true. I had to get another microphone, one of these over here. That would be better. Then it won't be all glitchy and delayed and awkward. But all right, man. I'll have you on episode number 3. I'm just joking.
I'm good. Looking forward to it. Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
All right. Oh yeah, go to his OT Schoolhouse, everybody. I think that's what you're supposed to do at the end of these, right?
OTSchoolhouse.com/podcast. Yep. Listen to a podcast episode. Love to have you there.
There you go. All right, thanks.